As long as I'm dancing, acting or rapping, walking around like I don't know what's happening. You like me, you like me, you like me. If I'm talking about drinking and nothing about thinking, as long as I'm high and I never ask why, you like me, you like me, you like me. Yeah. But the second I start with the state of the economy, black leadership, black cards, and black sovereignty, that's when you can't seem to follow me. Confusion, you feel like you're losing. I'm no longer amusing. This song's about choosing while you cruising. Either black entertainment or the black revolution. People love to see a young black man rap until he wakes up and realizes he's caught in the trap. So as long as I'm dancing, acting or rapping,
salute, Coach. What's happening, man?
Like, I don't know what's happening.
We back at it. We back at it. 10 AC King, salute, God. Peace, peace. Shout out to the scientists. We got another one. We got another good one. If y'all know who this gentleman is, you know we got a good one.
But the minute I get in about the way these rappers spit it, the minute I start spitting that truth, it becomes a critic. I freestyle off the top like removing your Yankee fitted. But they not really
gonna get the family a minute to jump in.
Many of the challenges we face, we can solve them, but there's no trust.
We're gonna get straight to it. I ain't gonna hold y'all too long today. So make sure to share this out, because we ain't gonna be here too long.
U.S. foreign policy is simply just bomber. Rebels against their own government.
The master teacher.
Then when things get out of hand, yeah, they try to calm them. More money, more diplomacy.
Let me share this out. Let me share it out.
That doesn't work.
Make sure to share it out, fam.
Turn them into a terrorist so they can disarm them. Through the corporate media, we don't stand a chance, but too many people want us to just stand and dance. So as long as I'm dancing, acting or rapping, walking around like I don't know what's happening, you like me, you like me.
Hold up, family. Let me make sure to get the family in. Share this out. We ain't gonna be here too long.
If I'm talking about drinking and not about thinking, as long as I'm high and I never ask why, you like me, you like me, you like me.
Anybody know who this is on the cover?
You like me.
Oh, I know Mo Powers know who this is. Salute, guys. What's happening, Mo?
You like me.
I know you know who it is.
You like me.
We're gonna get straight into it. Give it about 5 minutes. Let the family get in here. Hope you got your pen, your pad, mentally or physically. Be ready. It's on. It is on.
Wow, that's good.
Miss Parker in the bushes. Salute, Miss Parker. What's happening, Queen? There we go. There we go. Appreciate you tapping in. Salute to the scientists out there. Get a family a second.
I wrote a verse to one of your joints. It's totally not finished, but I'll see how far I get.
I gotta play Chris. It's only right to play Chris before we get into these gems by the master teacher. He a teacher himself. Yeah, I know you know who it is, Mo. This is KRS-One from the Between the Protests album. Go check it out. I've spoken on it a couple times. This is a bad man. This is a bad man.
Don't you fall for it. Don't you fall for it. Keep your head up. Never let them get you fed up. You just step up, get your rep up, get your cash up, get your check up. The whole system is set up. It's time we been get up. We've been about this revolution from the time we met up. Take it back. I got my fist up. Malcolm X in 88. A revolution only works for those that will participate. You are great. They are fake. Yo, it's time to demonstrate higher level mental states. Conscious people congregate. Show the love, not the hate. This is basic, no debate. But these people are debating.
Yeah, he's still doing it. He's still doing it. Miss Parker.
Yeah, the truth is incomplete, but the truth is never late. You can't see what they be doing, how they thinking, how they moving. You
I gotta play Chris at least one time every stream.
Don't fall for it.
Every stream.
Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. We can see who is the enemy.
Peace, Joseph. Salute, God. Peace, peace.
officials bringing
Make
them
sure
on.
to share
We
it
never
out,
see
hit
what
that
you never
like.
saw. 303, open the door.
Definitely
Now,
share this
hey,
out.
that is the game. Ignorance, that is insane. Don't fall for it. The reps and the Dems are the same. This one's shooting us up. That one's locking us up. This one got us stuck. That one's out of luck. You can front if you need to. The cycle never ends. No justice, but in 4 years they hyping us again. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. If you thinking and you learning and you drinking and you learning and you really not concerning with the news and what they learning, don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. If you love it, never hate it. You agreeing, don't debate it. HBCU educated, your degree is highly rated. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. Don't fall for it. Yo, me, I'm not a fake dude. I'ma keep it real. They see through it all that America needs a heel deal. America ain't really sick. This is what it really is. Gunshots and cages for black and brown little kids. Now they acting like they not the cause of how we live. Do not tell me what you gonna do. I can see what you did. Look at her. Look at him. Look at them. Look at me. Do you see our interests represented in society? No, you don't. And you won't. Cause democracy's a joke. Every 4 years they say people asking us to vote.
What's happening, guys? Salute. Shout out to the scientists.
Knowledge range game over. Don't fall for it.
Shout out to the
Don't you fall for it. Rodney King, George Floyd, man, we all saw it.
That's right,
So
Steve. Let them know.
Don't move with self-reliance while the soul is being
What's up,
silenced
Steve?
for the religion of science. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. If you thinking and you earning and you drinking and you learning and you really not concerning with the news and what they learning, don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. There's no justice in the courts. We are always taking shorts. They can shoot us like a sport, and it's not trust that they want. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it. Take it up.
Let's go, family. Hope you got your pen and your pad, your mental or physical or both. We're going to get into it. I ain't going to hold too much of your time today. If you know who this gentleman is, then you know how this finna go.
Don't you fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't you fall for it.
If you don't know who this is, this gentleman that is my profile picture right now, his name is Amos Wilson. You got to check him out. I'm not going to talk too much. Mr. Fab last album, Joe Blow, is pretty good, different, more positive. I can dig that. I'm going to check into it because I play music every morning. So, yeah, I'm going to check into that. But this is Amos Wilson, Dr. Amos Wilson. He's an author. He's a scholar. He's a, man, well-rounded gentleman. Master teacher for sure. Rest in peace to him. The video we'll be getting into today is titled Total War. Total War. Dr. Amos Wilson. Ain't gonna take up too much of your time. He gets straight to it. He don't bite his tongue, but he don't get out of pocket. You'll see. If you're not familiar, I'm pretty sure you'll appreciate this strain. But let's get into it. You know, we ain't doing all that, bro. Oh, excuse me. That's the one I'm doing tomorrow. I'm doing the psychological effects of environment, past to present. My bad, Joe. My bad.
Thank you very
Total
much.
War is tomorrow.
Thank you kindly. I'm indeed honored to
Let me shut up.
share the platform with such distinguished guests.
One of our greats.
Of course,
Absolutely.
we're invited to share this time with you this evening.
Hope you got your herbals.
Happy to take the time to come
Sit
out
back, relax.
for such a
Let's
very
get some game.
important occasion. And I'd like to congratulate this organization for putting at the center of its name ancestral commemoration. That is a very, very important
Make sure to share this out. Hit that
idea
like, fam.
and concept, because as I will try to demonstrate later, this is about more than mere commemoration, as is often done. We are about, frankly, transformation. We, in
If you're not familiar with them, check them out.
The process of transforming ourselves. We are engaging in a psychotherapeutic encounter in which our personalities are being transformed, in which our consciousness is being transformed, in which we are preparing to transform the power relations that now characterize the world. I'd like to give thanks for your support in terms of our publications, Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, the Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, Understanding Black Adolescent Male Violence, Black on Black Violence, Black Self-Annihilation in service of white domination. And this is a thing that's going on all over the globe. We see it in Rwanda, we've seen it in South Africa, we see it everywhere. Because you have to recognize, too often we begin our analysis without looking at the context in which the phenomena we are analyzing are occurring. And as I said in Black on Black, often we follow the European scheme of decontextualizing the subject matter. That is, talking about it as if it does not exist within a social system and a political system. So we talk about the Black family as if it exists in a vacuum and is not shaped by its political and economic circumstances in which it exists, you see. And you get a lot of ignorant talk about values, as if values are not created by political and economic systems. And so we're going to change the values of the Black family without changing the very values and the nature of American society itself. You see? Now we have somebody who claims that they are going to reduce illegitimacy. Clinton. It's an amazing situation. Not recognizing the fact that white teenagers are producing the highest so-called illegitimacy rate in the country. You have white teenagers producing some 250,000 children born out of wedlock in this very year.
There we go, Quinn. Salute.
Well over 100,000 more.
You know who I expect plenty of people to come in. I'm glad to see y'all come in when y'all do. Salute,
and if you look at this situation, talked about values. Behind white values is a plan for death. Yes. Just behind any kind of white morality is death and damnation for African people. You want to come out and tell people you should not have children unless you're able to take care of them.
Oh, you know,
then you turn around to see.
I only post and I only say things for a reason, a specific reason. Exactly, yo.
Exactly.
So
you want to tell the men, don't create children and let you.
Nothing about what I do is random.
And then you spend the
glad
time
you said
seeing to it that they're not employed to take care of the children. Then what ultimately are you asking? If they follow what you are projecting as a moral rule, then ultimately what you're asking the race to do is to what? To die. To die. To fade away. Don't be deceived then by apparent appeal to morality. One of these days I will talk to you about Eurocentric morality and demonstrate to you how behind each of their moral strictures and prescriptions lies a death plan for African people. You must come to understand that if people are
Joe Helio, salute Joe Helio.
A hateful relationship.
Shout out to the scientists, man.
That the object of hate
absolutely, coach,
is destruction.
Appreciate that. Let me be quiet though.
The object of love, of course, is growth and development and expansion, enhancement. The object of hatred is then death and destruction. The interesting thing about hatred is that it can often disguise itself as love. Mm-hmm. See, it is no accident in the metaphorical sense as to why the devil in the Bible was perceived as the most handsome angel. Because evil comes wrapped up as something very, very attractive. And that's why people fall into it. First, sin were as ugly as people talk about it, and painful and apparently dirty as people talk about it, we wouldn't have much of a problem rejecting it. It's because it looks good to us before we realize what it really is about. The very essence of evil and the very essence of the devil is what? Deception. The devil is known as the great deceiver. Beware of white men on a moral crusade. Yes.
Absolutely, Mr.
Because
Parker.
their original motives are still hidden and disguised. In the moral crusade to reduce crime and criminality in America, of course, is death and imprisonment for black men and ultimately death for black people. But that's another story.
Salute to y'all.
We're
It's
looking
good to
forward,
see
of course,
y'all
to
for real.
publishing our new book, Blueprint for Black Power, in about 2 months. We're going to give
It's a
you
good
plenty of
book.
reading, about 600 pages of it. So you can get ready, or curl up.
I believe I have 2 of his
get you one
PDFs,
reading together.
full PDFs, by the way. And I believe they're
Because
on
to
my
a great
Discord.
extent, a lot of the issues that we complain about, a lot of the complaints we make, a lot of the problems we discuss, essentially are problems that reflect relative powerlessness. And this is a subject matter that which people don't like to talk about very much. We've been made to think that power is evil and its pursuit is evil. Many of us have been made to think that power is intrinsically something that is possessed by white people, or at least non-African people. This is tragic, because power is at the very center of life. For without power, there is no life. The very fact that we stand up means that we have to have power to struggle against gravity's attempt to hold us flat to the earth.
You hear him.
Power has to do with the ability to do things, the ability to walk, to talk, to eat, to do all of the things we do require power.
Salute, Brazy. I see you, God. I'm glad you made it, fam.
When we talk about our inability to do certain things and to transform our situation, we are talking about power or the lack of it in one form.
It was a
or the
smart
other.
plan. It wasn't crazy at all.
We have
That
some
was a smart
interesting
plan.
theories out here and some interesting analyses which truthfully point to certain situations. But we have to look again.
My mind up to so much, not just killing.
It may
Absolutely,
be
Coach. Dig that.
that the white man treats us the way he does, and I don't doubt it, because he's seeking to protect his genes and gene pool. It may be that he is as aggressive and heartless as he is because he comes from an ice continent. It may be that he does what he does because he is hateful. However, in the end, I think the more fundamental approach to this issue is that the white man does what he does because he can do it. What do I care about a white man's genes? What do I care about his penis envy? What can we do about it? Cut it short? What do I care if he hates me? What are we going to do? Try to get him to love us? What if he never loves us?
Then what?
What do I care if he's cold and heartless? Try to heat him up? In the end, it really doesn't matter what the fundamental cause of this behavior is. In the end, he does what he does because he can, and because we have not yet developed the means to do what? To stop it. And he will stop doing what he does when we decide to end it and bring his rulership to a close. Yes, this is what's about. Not make excuses for his misbehavior. Not give a damn about whether he hates or whether he loves or whether he's cold or whether he's not. But to in his capacity to rule over our people. And until this day, we have black men out here who are going to decide that the ultimate mission at this point is to end their rulership by white men.
I can find that
It's
easy.
not going to change. Yeah, you got to end it. And fight.
Matter of fact, Christmas
man
coming
and
up. I'm trying to get this
boy,
book.
this white man.
I'm gonna post it in my community tab, y'all guys. You know,
That's right.
I'm trying to get 5 books before the.
No respecting.
It's dealing with what you talk about,
group
Joseph.
of men will place the feeding of their families in the hands of another ethnic group. No self-respecting group of men can inherit the wealth of the earth and the genius that I talk about in developmental psychology.
No, you ain't late. You right on time. You see the future.
You
right on time.
Employed by a bunch of white guys.
Salute to the scientists.
Yes.
Once again.
How dare you call yourself men and you're not about the process of destroying the power of white men over you. You can't be about manhood and not be about the destruction of white male power, because that power threatens the whole of life on earth. While it is good that we analyze the sexuality concerning balls, basketballs, and that's very truthful analysis, very much to the point. Balls going into various holes, and that, you know,
Francis
very
Cress
much
Wilson spoke
no
on
problem.
that. We went over that.
Critique. So this is not a critique, but there's a larger part of the game that must be paid attention to as well.
Agreed, Coach.
Recognize that basketball, football, soccer, and other things are primal male games, and ultimately are games of war, and involve themselves about the defense of territory. The line that runs down the center of the basketball court is a borderline. It separates two antagonistic forces.
Francis Cress Wilson, the ISIS
The major problem there is to defend your territory.
Get that book. I showed it.
Against incursions from the other side. And to what? Invade and take from the other what one must take in order to win and to survive. And it's interesting to see a whole psychology operating there. The psychology of teamwork, the psychology of organization, the psychology of morale, the psychology of hierarchy with captains and guards and other people operating there to defend territory and to defeat the enemy. And yet to see black men play that game and miss all the points. To see black men walk on that court and call themselves by one name, Bulls, and Bullets, and Knicks, and Celtics, to take one name and operate under that name, identify with that name, be proud of that name, organize around that name, and on top of that, to dress just alike in uniforms.
It is, though.
Yes.
Amos Wilson, get deep. Get his books. I'll show him after the stream.
Organize themselves and sit down and plot strategy and tactics. To study the nature of the enemy and seek to defeat that enemy. Isn't it amazing that black men can go on these courts and on these football fields, playing these primordial games of men and games that reflect the realities of life,
share this out,
and
man.
cannot play them in real life?
Run it back.
That reflect the realities of life and cannot play them in real life.
I agree, though.
And you can only play them under the courtship and the management of white men.
Come on now.
Create billions of dollars of wealth playing for pennies. $5 million a year is no money. When you're creating 2 and 3 billion or more, going into a ring, knocking another man's brains out for $20 million is no money. When the match itself generates over 200 million to $300 million, and you got a bunch of jokers out there living vicariously through this battle.
This is why I
And
do
so
it,
you
family.
got a bunch of men
This is
who
why I
will
do
take
it.
one name, bulls and so forth, and wear one uniform. And when they come off the court, you say, then why don't we call ourselves African? I'm an individual.
Now, all videos I show you, I done watched a couple times.
All of a sudden we're individuals. We're not connected. We are interbred with all kinds of races and groups. And yet this is how you make your money. This is how the thing works out.
Comments like this.
So there's a larger psychology there.
That's why I do it.
So we get young black males who will attack other ethnic group males with their kids just for walking down the street. They'll attack each other. I was talking to a lady the other day, a mother the other day, about her son who is literally locked within his own neighborhood because if he crosses the street that way, the gang that belongs to that project will attack him. If he goes the other way, that one will attack him. You know, territoriality. Territoriality. Turf, as they say.
Definitely appreciate that.
Isn't it interesting then that men and black men and young black boys can have this sense of territoriality? But when they become grown men,
show some love, family. Hit the likes.
Arabs can walk into the neighborhood and take the money and take the women. Koreans walk into the neighborhood, take the weapon, take the money, impoverish the children. All of the ethnic groups just walk in and freely take and win and rule over them. What happens to the sense of territoriality? But yet you go into these courts and you play into the midnight protecting territory. Someone must have psyched your mind out. You're not approaching these games correctly. The game you're playing is the game played on you.
Yeah.
Let's understand that. Therefore, you must study the dynamics of power. Confront it for real because it's the only thing that's going to keep you alive. There's no guarantee.
You hear the master teacher, man.
That you will be alive except that you fight to stay alive. We got some jokers out here who want to depend on Jesus. Just depend on the Lord.
Thank you, Jesus. Sweet baby Jesus.
Then they want to tell you, we're all God's children. He loves us equally. My God. I wonder what the Indians think about that, huh? God loves me the same as he loves white folks. And I'm being decimated. As you mentioned the Tasmanians. Right. Yes, the Aboriginals on Australia. And God is supposed to love what? All of us equally? You better rethink that again. What kind of love is that? Mind me again, you see, if you're going to read this Bible, you got to read it right. As we read in Exodus, God promises these people as a land. Promises them the land, right? And what has got to happen? When they get to the border, he just doesn't say, step right up and step right in. You're home, does it? You got to do what? You got to take it. You got to fight for it. You got to exterminate the people who are already there. Come on, let's face it. That's what's going on there. You got to fight for it. I promised it to you, but you got to do what? You got to fight for it.
Told you he don't pull his punches. He don't get disrespectful out of pop, but he's still.
Someone went in there and got scooped out. I think he sent over 12 to spy and to surveil the land. 10 of them came back. We can't beat them. They're invincible. They're giants. They're this. You know, pretty much the way a lot of us look at white people today. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There were only 2 that said we can beat them. Isn't it amazing? The land was promised, and yet they had doubt. God had to keep them in the wilderness another 40 years so that he could just destroy the doubters. Only those who said we can win despite the overwhelming forces, we can win despite the fact that they look invincible, achieve the promised land. We got a lot of black men out here rolling in the highways and byways, overcome by addictions and various other things, because they've reached the conclusion that the white man is invincible, that the white man cannot be defeated. Perhaps we're in our exodus where these cowards are dying. And perhaps those who will be left will be those who have made up their mind that he can be defeated.
Absolutely.
So we must study power. We're going to come out after that, of course, with educating
No
black
new
children
friends.
for the 21st
No new
century
friends,
rationale
right?
for an African education. Another 400 pages.
I can do bad on my own.
Because African people are as complicated as any other people. You know, we tend to think that we can write about African people in 25 words or less. You know, other people have libraries dedicated to them, and they build libraries dealing with themselves and their issues, and we want little books written in little language. No, we have complicated issues to confront. We must recognize that we have to change the education of our children. We're going to move rapidly here in light of the time. We want to get back here.
That's just how the
who say
recording
we
goes.
Forget the past.
When it go mute like that, that's just how they record it.
What does slavery have to do with it? You see. Why are we talking about
See the
slavery?
family coming in. Make sure to hit that like when you weigh in. Have your pen and pad ready.
The reality here, ladies and gentlemen.
Appreciate you coming through. Shout out to the scientists.
That the present that these people try to tell us to deal with is but the leading edge of the past. The past is what is brought to the present. How do we come to the present except from the past? The present is in great part a dynamic creation of the past. It is the past that the present is made of. The things on this earth, the minerals and all the other things from which we make new objects, were created billions of years ago.
Come on.
In reality, there is nothing new. We are all billions of years old because we are made of star stuff. We only are in our present forms within a chronology of years. But the atoms of which we are made have been here since the beginning. And in essence, then, we are the same age as is the universe, because we are, in effect, the universe.
The micro, the macro.
It is artificial, then, to seek to separate the past from the present. The nervous system which mediates the present, this brain, these nerves which interpret the present, react to the present, deal with our current circumstances, these nerves have been organized. And they have been organized when? In the past. We learned to walk in the past, we learned to talk in the past, we learned to do almost everything we do in the past, and yet we are doing it where? In the present, and we will do it in the future. But it's because we fall victim to the European demarcation of time. Because time does not have to be looked at as linear, as having a past, present, and future. We can look at time as a simultaneous existence.
Appreciate you, Bryce.
One of the major things we have to transform as African people when we gain control of ourselves and of our destiny is to transform the way time is defined. I don't have time to talk about that today, but at the center of educating black children for the 21st century, I talk about the fact that it is the time system in the educational structure that is destroying black children. The fact that we have
now you're just showing
inherited
out.
European
You're just
time.
showing out, Brazen.
We talk about grades, which is a time concept.
Absolutely, Coach.
Without recognizing we can define a grade to last any length and period of time we want to. We take achievement tests and other tests based on what? Time system, inherited it from other people. When you look throughout that system, then you will see to a great extent our children being destroyed because we have not questioned the time structure.
Okay, Joseph.
Look at how you feel when you say that you are late for work. Look at how your heart rate changes, your blood pressure changes. Look at how even your mental system begins to become disorganized. In other words, then time is not just an abstract intellectual concept. It has concrete influences on the mental organization of people, on their behavioral organization, upon their very bodies themselves. And when you then let another people impose a time system on you, they are then working on your mentality and your very physiology. And our children then are being driven crazy, and we ourselves being driven crazy because we are operating within the time units of other people. Every culture has a time dimension connected to it. CP time is serious time, and we got to understand how that time is intrinsically related to us. We ridicule it in a way because we think European time is the only time there is in the world. In the human mind, then, the past is always present. Where do you think history is? Out there, per se? Where do you think it is? History is where? In your head. If man did not exist, if he were not alive, history would be pointless. And if history exists in our brains and in our minds, then that means history is present. And that means history operates in the here and now. The unconscious that we talk about, and that we see that operates and motivates our behavior, the unconscious is the forgotten past operating in the present. Simply operates and motivates our behavior. The unconscious is the forgotten past operating in the present. Simply because you don't remember it does not mean that it's not operating and transforming your behavior. We know that unconscious history and unconscious experiences, though long forgotten, still influence the way people behave, the way they see the world, the way they interact with the world. I want to impress on you one other thing. There are a lot of people who want to forget history, and thinking forgetting history, they are escaping its effects. You know, in physics, they talk about something called antimatter.
I just said something to that nature, Coach.
Not matter.
Like a stream ago, two
But
streams
it
ago.
does matter. It is what? Real.
I didn't want to interrupt.
Even though it's antimatter. The unreal real. Carrying a charge and carrying a spin. And it's a part of the calculations of physics. Well, we have something we call anti-knowledge, I guess. In other words, ignorance.
Ignorance. I use
But
that
ladies
word
and
all the
gentlemen,
time.
ignorance is not just an absence of knowledge. It is a real force in the personality. You behave differently when you're ignorant of something than when you what? Know it. So ignorance itself has a palpable and measurable effect on real behavior. And when you what?
I hear
Know
that again.
it. So ignorance itself has a palpable and measurable effect on real behavior.
Come on.
And therefore, an ignorance of your history, an ignorance of slavery does not permit you to escape its effect. That ignorance itself becomes a part of your very behavior and the very way you approach the world and deal with the world.
I say this shit every morning.
You can't escape it.
Every morning I
whether you try to forget it or not. If you seek to forget the history of slavery and not study it, thinking that you have thereby escaped its influences, let me remind you that you have not escaped its influences. Because one thing, you must know enough about it to want to escape it. You see? So every time I read it, I get mad, I get nervous, I get anxious, I feel bad, I feel inferior, I feel this way, or that way. That's why I don't want to know about it. Well, you know enough about it to feel that way about it. It means then that if you are leaving, if you are not studying that history because you're afraid of it, because you're suffering from anxiety and dealing with it, if it means that you don't want to come to terms with the history because you're seeking to deny reality, you're seeking to distort your present existence, you're seeking to live in some kind of fantasy and some kind of false hope, then it means that you're being motivated by negative forces. It means your life then becomes organized by fear. It becomes organized by escape. It becomes organized by denial. In other words, in seeking to explore history, in trying to deal with its fears and anxiety, escape fears and anxiety, denial become primary motivating forces in your personality. So again, you don't escape it, even if you think you don't know it.
YouTube skip. I don't know what
personality to then become taken over by negativity, and you become by escape, which reduces your capacity to learn from experience, and reduce capacity to deal positively with your existence and to transform life and to transform the world and witness the confusion
go back to normal.
that occurs as a result now of operating in a whole new world that they did not exist in before.
That's a good point, Coach.
Witness the problem they have when they can no longer apply the knowledge that they had learned in the original
spotlight
world, in the new world.
Hey, yo, we ain't having this.
I ain't never heard powerlessness they suffer.
I don't know if that's how they recorded that shit.
As long as they have not figured out the parameters of the new world that they've been snapped into all of a sudden, how they are then at the behest of those who
Trust
really
me, I hit these points
because they don't know how it operates, and they don't know how to operate in it because everything they've learned before for longer of any value. When we talk about slavery then and enslavement of African people, we're talking about a time warp. Think about the world and our ancestors lived in prior to the slave trade. Think about the consciousness that they existed in. The religions and the cultures and the values and the dress and the taste and the perceptions of reality, their interact with the world, their social relations, their social institutions. Think about all those things and then think about capture, the Middle Passage, slavery itself, and colonialism, which forms the time warp. And when they go through that warp, they're in a new world in which they never existed before. And this is the world we are in today. This is the world we share with our ancestors. We are on the other side of the veil. We're in a new consciousness where African tradition now is a very difficult thing to call on, where we cannot call on our African gods, where we have not yet been able to use our African institutions as effectively as we used them before. Think about these ancestors as they moved into a whole new world, a whole new way of working, a whole new set of values, a whole new set of time systems, a whole new language system, economic system, social system, set of social relations, and so forth. And literally overnight, they're into this world. And think of the tremendous stress that was required for them to try to adjust as they saw their older systems no longer functional in the new world. We are still in that condition right now. We are still struggling with it today. How dare you then say that that's in the past and that nothing has nothing to do with you? Ask yourself the question, why are you speaking the language we speak today? Is this an African language I'm speaking here now? Is this the language that we would have been speaking had we been on the other side of the veil? Is this a language that was forced upon our ancestors and our slave ancestors? And isn't this the same language you're speaking now? Then how do you say you're not connected with the slave experience when you speak a slave language at this very
Salute,
moment?
Caribbean Casanova. Peace, peace. Shout out to the scientists. Good to see you, family.
Slavery was no mere taking advantage of the labor of black people, the mere use of black bodies. Slavery was a period of mass transformation of consciousness, was a transformation of culture, was a transformation of the African personality. Slavery involved the niggerization of African people. It involved opening up the African personality and interjecting it a possessing spirit that now we call nigga. We didn't know anything about nigga until we got over here.
Come on.
And then you lay all the, what are the characteristics? And you see us acting it out day in and day out in our street and everywhere. What kind of values do we have today? Are those the original values, or are those the values taught our slave ancestors and ourselves? What kind of God are we giving praise to? Are they original gods, or is the religion we have now a religion given to us in slavery? What kind of family organization do we complain about? What are the dynamics that go on in the black family today if those dynamics were not determined by our being going through the time war of slavery? Even when you had a black man and a black woman in the field, and they may have consummated the marriage and children, it was still not a duplicate of the white man and white woman's marriage because the family was a slave family. And the dynamics of being a slave family changed the relationship between the man and his wife and the man and his children. And even today, the black man's relationship to his black wife and his relationship to his children is still not a duplicate of the white man's relationship to his wife or to his children because we are still a servant people. And those dynamics enter into our social relations with our families and our people. How dare you say then that your living today is in no way connected to the past? We are the past.
Always.
We and our ancestors are one and the same because we share the same experience. We speak the same language. We are an alienated people. What does that mean? Those of us who have forgotten history have forgotten ourselves. That means we have become estranged and distant from ourselves as a people. And therefore, African culture appears to be us an alien culture, a strange culture. This is the essence, you see. We have little familiarity with it. We do not feel at home with it. Where do you think this process began? It began in slavery, and it still operates today. To be alienated also means to exist for the benefit of aliens. That's why you're alienated in the first place. When aliens capture you, they must ultimately alienate you to adapt you to their demands. That is why when we spend our money in these streets today, when we have neighborhoods that are 100% black, we can only support alien merchants. Yes. And when we go to work, we can only work for alien people. And when we're educated to qualify for alien companies and alien corporations.
I don't even want to say nothing, just let
There has been no basic change since slavery. The essence of slavery is servitude. And the black man is still a servant today. You're in us, and we are just as much servants and operating to the benefit of the white man today as our slave great-great-grandparents did in the past. Don't be deceived by your little profession. There's nothing changed in this situation. We have not yet come out of slavery. As I mentioned yesterday on the radio, at the very bottom of black education, at the very what I call and what I'll talk about in educating black children for the 21st century, when I talk about the explicit curriculum and the implicit curriculum, the hidden curriculum, behind every curriculum in America is the assumption that black people are being trained to work for white folk. Right. The whole organization of every school, primary, secondary, child care, daycare, whatever it is, operates on the assumption that we are here to work for white folk. Yeah, every course, everything is set around that issue, that we will serve white folk, that white folk will provide us with the jobs, that white folk will protect our interests, that we are here to benefit white folk, and we are concerned then about how we can best qualify to meet the criteria demanded by white folk. In other words, then, in getting our degrees and getting our education, we're preparing to put ourselves on the slave block and ask whites to bid the highest prices based on our qualifications.
Make sure to hit that like, share this out, family. Subscribe.
You must understand that a true education, a true African-centered education is an education that centers itself on African issues and African liberation, not working for white folk. That is truly concerned then, that puts African concern at the center of the educational process. And ultimately is concerned with disempowering white folk, and is ultimately concerned with employing ourselves and creating our own job and gaining control of our own destiny. We have to then ask, what criteria must we meet? Must we socialize ourselves? Must we educate ourselves in order to become the people we must become? In order to solve the problems we must solve. This is the essence of what an African-centered education is about. Because if an African-centered education does not solve your problem, it is not an education. If being trained in computer science and technology and white law and all the other things ultimately cannot protect your very biological existence, if these things cannot remove your dependency on another people for your very life and for your very bread, then you're being miseducated. I don't care where you get the education from. We look here then,
oh shit, I forgot.
We can see that past the time war, we were brought into a new consciousness, an alien.
Hold on, family.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit educational or personal use tips the balance our favor of fair use.
Had to do it.
Speaking a new tongue, operating and motivated in terms of new values, religion, family organization and dynamics. We saw ourselves in a way we'd never seen ourselves before. We define ourselves now in ways we've never defined ourselves before. We're engaged in social relations, the like of which we never engaged in before. We are caught in servitude, still in servitude, and it is the intention of the white man that we never come out of servitude until he no longer needs us and decides to create genocide against us. We now have new learning styles because our whole cognitive way of thinking and our whole way of processing information has been transformed by the slave experience. That's why I tell you, you can't have an appropriate African-centered education until you have an appropriate theory of learning, because our very ways of thinking and reasoning and so forth was transformed by the slave experience. And one of the major problems we have in the educational institution today is that the way our children are taught and the way we are approached in terms of education has nothing to do with the way we are organized in terms of the way we think and behave and are motivated. There's a complete opposition between the way the school is designed and the way we are designed as people and have been designed by the slave experience and the experience in America. There's nothing wrong with African children. Black children do not come to school. Black children do not come to school behind white children. They come to school as they are. What does this imply then? It implies then that it is the school that needs to be what? Transformed, not the African child. But once you know that what we have experienced is a psycho-history, not a mere history and experience, but a psychological transformation. When you talk about education, then you will design a theory of pedagogy, a method of teaching that is in line with the psychology that has been created by the slave experience, and one that says, I know how this mind is structured as a result of that experience. How do we want to restructure that mind so that it can achieve the things we need to achieve? What do you mean then? And here we have what? New tastes, new foods. Even our soul foods reflect the slave experience. Those foods we find so satisfying to our palates. We have new names and new identities, and you dare say the past had nothing to do with you. What kind of lies are you going to continue to tell yourself? The forms of government in which we are under today in the United States were created by
over here all the time.
We're still operating with it.
I hope y'all appreciate this. Shout out to the scientists.
The layout of the land and organization of the land is still there. They are frozen history, but history that canalized our very existence. How can Nelson Mandela forget the past with the whole past, the highways and the buildings and the law and the structure, all creations of the past are still structuring African life today. And you're going to forget the past.
Who that is laughing?
We're in a new consciousness. I want you, when you read this next book, I'm going to talk about consciousness. Consciousness is power. Consciousness is the means by which people adapt to the world and adapt the world to themselves. Consciousness is based on history and experience. It is based on methods of processing information and processing that information which comes out of history and experience in ways to solve problems. Consciousness involves values which gives consciousness direction and purpose and goals. What we have done then is let another people determine the content of our consciousness, the information that's in our consciousness. So that when we seek to behave, if that information is false, if that information is irrelevant, if that information is inadequate, even if we have good brains and good thought patterns, even if we can reason, we're going to reason on false premises and misdirect our behavior. You understand what I'm saying? Even if you can think and reason well, and even if you have solid facts, but your values are wrong. You understand? If your tastes are wrong, if your desires are wrong, if your needs are wrong, even with that capacity to reason logically and to reason analytically and critically, even with the facts in your mind, you're going to still come out misbehaving and behaving against your interests because you're going to behave in a way to achieve values that have been inculcated in you by another people. And therefore, when you let another people inculcate values and create needs as they do through the media and create desires and so forth, then even with factual knowledge and even with a top-notch logical mind, you will still be self-destructive. So those Henry Louis Gates, those Cornel West, and those other people who think they've learned the knacks of syllogism and think they've learned the knacks of philosophical thinking and critical analysis because they values are given to them by the white man, they still end up supporting the white power over them. I will end it here. I will end it here. Why do we commemorate this day? What is this commemoration about? It is to enhance our awareness, because ultimately awareness is remembering, bringing back the parts which have been separated by the time warps of time, reconnecting across the veil and creating new continuities. When we talk about Africa prior to the slave trade, and when we concentrate on that time warp, and when we look at where we are now, we are remembering and reconnecting and creating continuities that transform our personalities and our organization and social relations as a people. When we call back from the forgotten past and reconnect it with the present so that it can be of use to us now and in the future. When we commemorate, we recognize the past, which means we also rethink and recognize ourselves and recognize the present and recognize the future, and in doing so change these things. We recollect and we recreate. We become new creatures and take new names and take new values and take new goals and orientations and create new desires and new wishes and hopes and so forth. This is what we do when we commemorate, when we look at that middle passage. We're looking at this situation here then, where we go back into the time warp, and instead of letting it be under the control of Europeans and let ourselves be the accidental reflection of that time warp, we look at that time warp again. We look at the mid-passage. We look at our capturing in slavery. We look at them and reframe them, restructure them, reorganize them, and in restructuring them, reframing them, we change the consciousness that they created originally, and we thereby become self-creating and self-determining. And then now, instead of being controlled by that time warp, instead of being controlled by that forgotten slave experience, of being controlled by that middle passage, because we come to know it, because we recall it, because we bring it up and re-examine it and restructure it and interpret it. Instead of then being controlled by it, we thereby, through this analysis, gain control over our consciousness, and through it gain control over our behavior, and through it gain control over our destiny as a people. We make the unconscious conscious, and if consciousness is power, we regain power. We are in the process there this evening of empowering ourselves. Because what makes an African-centered consciousness? An African-centered consciousness is a consciousness based on African history and culture and the African experience, based on knowledge relevant to African people and African issues, based on solid African information and other information relevant to our liberation as a people and self-control as a people. It means gaining control of our information processes, our thinking systems, our analytical faculties, so that they can process this African-centered knowledge and information in a way that it solves African-centered problems. And having African-centered values, so that when we seek to satisfy those values, when we seek to satisfy our desires, which are African desires, when we seek to satisfy those needs which have been generated by
All support
African
is
self,
appreciated. Absolutely.
we
Appreciate
then
that,
empower African people.
All support
We
is
then
appreciated.
enrich African people, because where your values are, there is your money, there is your sweat and blood. That is why the Europeans then has our young people valuing Nike sneakers. Sneakers that only cost $5.60 to manufacture. Sneakers for which Indonesian women are paid $1.35 a day. Sneakers for which Michael Jordan is paid $20 million to advertise. Enough money to pay the whole Indonesian workforce that makes the sneakers. And you got African young men out here in the street killing each other so that they can buy them, because someone has created in them a value for these pieces of rubber. They sell drugs and they kill and they mock. Why? Because they've let a white man put into their minds that these junks are nothing of value.
Now y'all see why I do what I do, right?
Why
Dr.
is
Amos
it
Wilson. Come on,
you
man.
think freedom is doing what you want to do? Then why isn't everything you want to do, you gotta pay aliens to do it? Because they put the values in your mind. They've created the desires in your mind. So consequently, you see, when you desire things African, when you need things African, you see, you destroy European power that depends on what you're trying to satisfy, desires that they put in. You understand? And if they're African desires, if they're African needs, if they're African values, and fulfilling them, you enrich and empower African people. This is what we are about here tonight. We are connecting ourselves again to our greatest source of power, and that is our African past to create our African future. Thank you.
Man, come on, family.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit educational or personal use tips the balance our favor of fair use.
Hit that like, man. This man bring you dope content, good conversation, real knowledge, positive energy. Man, hit the like already. Shit.
Had to do it, family. Had to do it. That was Dr. Amos Wilson, the psychological effects of environment, past and present. Go check him out. Go check him out. This is the stuff we talk about every day on this channel because it was just all on point. Originally, we are masturbation, we are in a bad place because we're not bad. Man and woman didn't create the temples alone, right? And that's why we push the narrative over here. It's a different narrative, man. When you know better, you do better. Like he said, ignorance. That's the main thing. Ignorance.
Keep your head up, never let them get you better.
And so we got to push a different narrative over here. We got to push the information. We got to push. We got to make intelligence cool again. Because being a dumbass is cool. I don't know how that works, but that's what it seems like. Just to be a dumbass is cool. And I don't get down like that. And I don't expect anybody who rock with me to even be on that type of energy. So I know y'all don't. That was Dr. Amos Wilson. We're going to do a part 2 tomorrow, like I said. Total War. That's going to be the one for tomorrow. Candace, it's okay. It's okay. I'm keeping these up. Anytime I do the Time with the Master Teacher videos, I keep them up. So even if you miss it, you don't miss it. You dig what I'm saying? We got a problem with understanding economics. We take it strictly as financial. It's not strictly financial. It actually means work together. The actual physical actions, the mental actions, the discipline. We got to learn economics to do the divide and conquer situation, that whole little perspective of strategy and attack. It works beautifully. It has worked beautifully. Don't fall for it. One of my first videos, Joseph has been here for a very long time. One of my first videos is Stop Playing the Victim. That's one of my first videos I did. It's called Stop Playing the Victim. I'm not good with excuses. I can only let ignorance pass for so long. If you had every opportunity not to be ignorant, that's on you. You just chose that shit. At this point, people are choosing to live comfortably in ignorance. Or I'm right, you wrong, I'm right, you wrong. Let me get the last word. Woo, 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 woo. Anything that's aggressive in discourse against, in opposition. That's what's popping right now. You know what I'm saying? So knowing that I know better, because I can just look outside and I use my logical mind and, get out my feelings. You can see them. You can see what's going on. Tell them, Chris. You're very appreciated. I appreciate y'all. Y'all know I appreciate y'all all the time, every time. Just seeing y'all names pop in means a lot to me. Just knowing you made it means a lot to me. And I'm a motherfucker in Ohio. You dig what I'm saying? But it's sincere. You're living an amazing time. On one side it's looking ugly, but on the other side, it's a great time to be in. It's the balance of a perfect storm. Absolutely. But family, I'm about to shake the premises. I do appreciate y'all. I hope y'all appreciate this. Those who came and stayed, I appreciate y'all. Those who came and had to move on, they had to groove, I dig that. I appreciate you stopping in as well. You might not even see this part, but it's cool. I appreciate you anyway. With that being said, we're gonna do a part 2 tomorrow. And as you know, if you've been tapping in, I do 2 videos of each teacher. Go to your community tab, and when it opens, there'll be 2 little squares in the bottom left. One will look like a stat chart, and one will be like a little square. Press the little square, pull up your picture, add a caption if you like, and post it. Go to your community tab on your channel, and it'll be right next to playlist or music or some shit. But family, like I said, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate every time I see y'all pop in. It's just a good, we pushing a better narrative out here. We ain't, if you're ignorant motherfucker, this channel ain't for you. If you're sensitive, this ain't for you. And I can't stand that. It's time to put our differences aside and create as much as possible, either generational wealth or generational ignorance or relationships that will benefit to one another. It's all good. Well put. With that being said, I'm out here. I'm out of here. I gotta go. Appreciate y'all. Peace.